Chapter 1231. Bojio moved, about to walk over. The soft sound of the door lock came from behind her. Almost instantly, Bojio switched off the monitor. She used one hand to press on the computer while the other reached for her phone. She leaned against the desk. That was the scene Li Jin saw when he entered. The youngster had his head lowered, his fingers moving slightly, his black hair covering his eyes. He looked extremely intense, even the sound effects could be heard. It was the game that had been trending recently. Li Jin knew the people around him were playing it. He glanced up, glancing towards Bojio before turning to look at his bookshelf. He seemed to be scanning the room for signs of movement, waiting for the youngster to notice him. Li Jin was a refined man, fair and clean as though he hadn't matured yet. He wasn't tall and didn't seem to sleep well. There were obvious dark circles under his eyelids. His eyes were deep, but there wasn't any life in them. He looked like a malnourished person who often stayed up late. Moreover, he was very quiet. He was so quiet that when you first saw him, you would think that this boy was easy to bully. Bojio lifted her lids, a lollipop in her mouth. When she saw him, she straightened, her guard down. Li Jin? It's raining outside. Auntie asked me to come in. Li Jin didn't reply, taking in the youngster's discomfort. He lowered his lashes, hiding his emotions. Bojio glanced out of the window. Is it still raining? If it isn't, I'll head back. It's still raining, Li Jin replied. Bojio chuckled. Then I'll have to stay here to seek shelter. He was lying. The sound of the rain had stopped. How could it still be raining? Bojio returned to her original position without a change in expression, her fingers still moving across the screen. She tilted her head and asked, Do you want to play? Do you want to play together? I'm not playing. Li Jin sat in front of the computer, his actions seemingly casual but in reality, he was checking something. Bojio saw everything. Like a gaming addict, she even turned on the voice message. The top lane, retreat. Don't go that way, take a detour. Li Jin listened to the commotion, closing the calendar on the wall silently. He turned towards Bojio, who was still immersed in her game. He didn't say a word, until the sound of plates shattering came from downstairs. Bojio lifted her head abruptly, and walked towards the door like a normal customer. What happened to the kitchen? Li Jin remained silent as though he was used to it. Bojio wondered if she could see any other emotions on his face. No. Besides standing there, his face was devoid of any emotion. Even though the sound was getting louder and louder, the noise that entered his ears was incomparably clear. You can't even serve a dish? Tell me, what else can you do? It's fine if you're just a piece of trash, but you even brought a money-losing product to me. Don't be like this, there are guests at home. The woman lowered her voice. The man inhaled deeply, glancing over just in time to catch sight of Bojio and Li Jin. He adjusted his collar, probably not wanting to embarrass himself in front of outsiders. He reeked of alcohol as he headed upstairs. Bojio felt that she should be feeling awkward, hence, she stood there in a daze, stopping her game. Li Jin walked towards the woman, his voice calm. He hit you again. Little Jin, what are you talking about? The woman glanced at Li Jin, indicating that there was a guest. Your dad has a bad temper and with the alcohol, it's inevitable for him to shout. Li Jin glanced at her, his expression empty. He's drunk for 24 days a month, which means you've been getting beaten up for 24 days. The woman hurriedly added, he's drunk when he's not drinking. He's not bad when he's not drinking, Li Jin interrupted. But he'll mock me during the meal. The woman tugged on her son's sleeves, trying to stop him from continuing. Li Jin glanced down at her. Are you still not divorcing? The woman didn't reply. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about it, but there were too many things to consider. Besides, he was really nice to her when he wasn't drinking. It seems like you really like being hit. Li Jin's eyes were filled with emotions when he said that. There was hatred, there was pity, there was fear, there was unbearable pain, and there was darkness that no one could see through. With a loud bang, the door slammed shut. Only Bojio and the woman were left in the living room, the atmosphere extremely quiet. There were still pieces of plates on the floor. Am I really useless? The woman reached out to cover her face. No one would want their child to hate them, but she could clearly see her uselessness in her son's eyes. Bojo wanted to say that she wasn't useless, but selfish and weak. She was selfish and didn't want to get a divorce, afraid of losing her current life. After all, there was a man around, but she used the child as an excuse. Probably, excuses like "I did it for your own good" or "because I liked him" were the most harmful. They didn't do it for others, they did it for themselves. But everyone had their own way of doing things. If she was Li Jin, the moment the man made a move, she would beat him into submission. He hadn't been able to retaliate in primary school. Now that he was in high school, his eyes were filled with fear, and he didn't even have the courage to take a step forward. Yet he was able to be unyielding in front of his mother. This was a contradictory trait for Li Jin. There was a sense of danger, but he was so weak and useless. This was probably the influence of his environment. But Bojo had a feeling something was about to happen. Based on Li Jin's words, the woman's answer had obviously affected his decision in some aspects. What decision would it be? Bojo lowered her gaze. The woman wiped her tears when she didn't reply. Why did I mention this to you? I'm so sorry, you came to deliver Xiao Jin's book and yet, you saw such a scene. Bojo shook her head hurriedly. The rain has stopped. Auntie, I'll be leaving now, don't let your imagination run wild. In the room just a door away, Li Jin listened to the commotion outside, his eyes darkening. His thick fringe covered his eyes, a faint light seeping out from the corner of his eyes. Chapter 1232. Soon his phone buzzed. Transfer student? He's pretty smart, he's already in the group. After reading the reply, Li Jin typed 2 more words. Is that so? Does King suspect something is wrong with him? The girls in the class had indeed treated Li Jin as king, but they didn't know who he was in real life. Li Jin glanced at his laptop, his typing slowing down. He seems rather enthusiastic? He's all right. The teacher asked him to send some information to Li Jin and he agreed. Li Jin watched as his name appeared on the screen, his lips turning cold. Since that's the case, he'll be the clown from tomorrow onwards. He hated it when others saw how pathetic he was. Li Jin couldn't forget how it felt when those people bullied him, pushing his head outwards. In the end, he realized that humans were social animals. Not only did they live, but they also blindly followed others in their actions. As long as there was someone they could bully, they would swarm over. Li Jin remembered that he had recorded many things on his phone and passed them to the teacher, who had called for both parties' parents. But because the other party's father was a minor official in the county, his stepfather had given him a slap, and his mother had apologized profusely. In the end, he had been kicked even harder by his classmates. They had even taken off his pants. Li Jin never went back to school. Instead, he used another identity to get close to them. Every single one of them wanted attention. Hence, he gave them attention. Gradually, everyone started to compare themselves, twisting the truth behind their backs, and lying became a daily routine. Regardless of their family background, they had to wear branded clothes. As long as they liked it, it was theirs. If others wanted it, they would call them stingy and proud of their lack of morals. It was too easy to use such people. By now, Li Jin had complete control over their minds, which was why they called him a clown. Whoever became a clown would be ostracized by the entire class. When Li Jin had chosen his students, it had been in line with their wishes. They had long wanted to teach them a lesson, but because of their status, they had to deal with the clown. Hence, he would give them the clown card. Everyone wanted to avoid becoming a clown, but they had never thought of leaving the group. That was because they enjoyed the feeling of being in a group. Choosing a transfer student this time was a last-minute decision. Even if there was nothing wrong with him, and no one had touched the things in his room, he hated it when someone appeared and broke the long-standing balance. Bojo guessed that she had been targeted. After all, Li Jin's thoughts were really deep. Bojo didn't leave in a hurry. She was being watched, not exposed. Li Jin probably did not suspect her. The people sent by the police probably wouldn't think of investigating high school students. Even if it was an investigation, it would definitely be done from the perspective of a victim. Hence, this gave Li Jin enough time to do something. But how did Li Jin know Kuang? What kind of method did he use to contact it? These things were crucial. As long as they understood these 2 points, they might be able to find out who Kuang was. Bojo held the steering wheel with one hand. She tilted her face slightly, her fingertips caressing her lips. This was something she often did when she was thinking. Chapter 1233. His father and I are usually too busy to take care of him, causing him to grow slower than other children. His body condition isn't good either. Now he has to stay in the infirmary most of the time, and can't even jog in the morning. I'm worried that something is bothering him, and he might not be able to get over it. In the infirmary, Bojo sat up straight, placing one hand on the steering wheel. Suddenly, she did a beautiful drift. She finally understood why she had found the school doctor's scent familiar when he had approached her. It was a drug that was only used when he was soaking corpses. He wasn't an ordinary school doctor. Everything could be explained now. Why had she felt sleepy when they had been chatting? Because Kwang was an expert in hypnosis. However, it was probably because he had spent too much time on her and was interrupted, so he didn't succeed. He had pretended to be the school doctor. On the surface, he had been treating the students. But in reality, everyone was the most defenseless when they were sick. With Kwang's skills, it was a piece of cake to guide the students psychologically at this moment. He should be the person most familiar with the student's condition. He would pick the smartest one and create a group. After that, he wouldn't need to do anything. He just had to watch from the side, and the students would start to change. That was why Bojo felt that this brainwashing gathering was troublesome. You wouldn't be able to tell which of them wasn't affected. Time was crucial. Perhaps he was like this now, but after staying in a group for a long time, he would become another person. Gradually, he would start to habitually invade others, and eventually he would become vain. Whoever affected his vanity, he would distort the truth. When everyone became like this, the school wouldn't be able to be saved. How terrifying would a person who was corrupted from the root become after entering society? This would always be a mystery that no one could solve. Bojo drove at high speed. People were walking on the side of the road, watching a sleek black Lamborghini rush into the school. The guard was dumbfounded. The speed was too fast and he couldn't stop it. Bojo turned on her Bluetooth earpiece as she walked. I found Kwang. Kwang? Young Master Tang paused. He was smart. He's in school? Immersing, Bojo replied. You definitely wouldn't expect him to be disguised as a school doctor. I really didn't expect it. No wonder I didn't find any problems even after checking all the teacher's information. After young Master Tang said that, he added, Don't act on your own. Wait for backup to arrive. Beep, beep, beep. It was obvious that the youngster had hung up. The man pressed between his eyebrows. Without wasting any time, he immediately contacted the local spies. There were too many people in the school. If there were any dangerous people around, it would cause panic. When the time came, it would be difficult to control the situation. Kwang's biggest danger was that he was good at hypnosis. Perhaps he had already set up a trap without you knowing. It was impossible to tell how many people in the school were under his control. If it was too obvious, it would be easy for the other party to notice. At that time, all the students in the school would become his hostages. Hence, she had to find Kwang without alerting him. Bojo walked quickly. It was still drizzling, splashing onto her uniform, but she didn't seem to feel it. Her hair was wet, and the students who were walking back and forth couldn't help but turn back to take a look. After all, this new transfer student was too handsome. Moreover, they felt that he looked a little familiar, but they just couldn't remember where they had seen him before. Bojo didn't stop. She reached over and with a swoosh, a military knife appeared from her long sleeves. When she reached the infirmary, she slowed down. After interacting with the Almighty for a long time, she also understood that many psychologists could not only analyze a person's mental state from their expression, but they could even calculate their breathing. Bojo paused outside for 3 seconds before walking in. At this hour, there weren't many people in the infirmary, especially on such a gloomy and rainy day. Other than the school doctor on duty, no one would be around. But today it was even more deserted. In addition to the hospital bed, there was only the fountain pen on the table. Its owner was nowhere to be found. Bojo slowed down her footsteps. She turned and pressed her back against the wall. She turned sideways and pulled the curtain open. There wasn't anyone in the lounge. She walked back and forth twice and returned to her original position. She was just about to pick up the form on the table. A voice came from behind him with a chuckle. "Which class are you from? Why are you here at this hour? Where do you feel unwell?" Bojo paused, turning her head. "Headache. It should be the flu. It's you." As the man spoke, he sat back in his seat and took out a thermometer. "Looks like our new school hunk is a little weak. Let's test his temperature first." Bojo glanced at his refined face, taking the thermometer naturally and placing it in her mouth. The thermometers these days were more advanced and didn't need to be clipped under her arm, preventing her from being exposed. "How did you catch a cold? Did you catch a cold wind?" After saying that, the man unlocked his phone and a message appeared. It was about the young man standing before him. A contestant from Supreme Alliance? His fingers stilled, and then he laughed. When he glanced up, the smile on his face changed. This was the person Fanjia had mentioned, the person Chinemo couldn't let go of? Should he say that she was unlucky or that he was lucky? Even though her hair color was different and her face was slightly different, Kuang never judged a person by their appearance. But Kuang never judged a person by their appearance. That was why he had gotten someone to investigate. He hadn't expected to find such a pleasant surprise. Since she was here, she shouldn't leave. Kuang placed the stethoscope down, a faint smile spreading across his face. He glanced at the time. "It's almost time, pass me the thermometer." Bojo handed it over with one hand, her side profile clear and elegant. Kuang chuckled. She was indeed someone who knew how to disguise herself. If he hadn't had an impression of her, her disguise would have been able to fool him. It was impressive for a girl to disguise herself as a youngster without the slightest hint of awkwardness. It was a pity. She had met him. Kuang glanced at the thermometer, his voice still gentle and unguarded. "You have a slight fever. Drink some medicine. I'll rush it up for you." 37-9. Bojo tilted her knife. He really knew how to lie. "Thank you, teacher." Bojo sat down. Kuang chuckled lightly. "You're welcome." The cold medicine was laced with sleeping ingredients. If she drank it, it would be easier for him to drop the hint. Since she was someone Chinemo placed in his heart, she had to be treated differently. Being betrayed by the person he loved was more painful than knowing Chinmo's true feelings. Kuang raised his hand, shaking the glass in his palm. He lowered his lids and passed the medicine to her. "Drink it. Once you drink it, you will become my puppet." Fanjia hadn't found out Bojo's true identity. Hence, in Kuang's eyes, she was just a child who overestimated herself. He just had to use his usual methods on her. He hadn't expected what happened next to be completely out of his expectations. The moment the youngster took the glass, she flipped her hand, splashing all the water into his eyes. It happened in an instant. Bojo leaped up, the military knife in her hands pressed against Kuang's neck. When he felt the pain, Kuang narrowed his eyes in shock. But very quickly, he calmed down and broke into a light laugh. "Not bad, with such speed. You must have suspected me long ago. You didn't show any signs of suspicion just now. Even though Chinemo is crippled, it seems like he still has his psychological knowledge. Even the people around him seem smarter than the average person. But do you think you can catch me with your own strength? Hehe, seems like Chinemo didn't tell you. Don't expose your back." Bojo turned instinctively when she heard Kuang's words. She watched as a person raised a stool and was about to smash her head. She turned swiftly, pressing down on the military knife with one hand. Bojo used her strength and kicked sideways. Bang! That person was kicked to the ground. Kuang made use of the time difference to leave Bojo's range. The person on the ground curled into a ball in pain, shouting, "Teacher, hurry up and leave." It was the girl who had been bullied, Lu Jianing. She grabbed onto Bojo's ankle, her eyes filled with hatred. "Tomorrow, I'll take the lead and you'll be the clown. Do you know how important it is for me to take the lead? I was appointed by Wang and I was the one who created the group chat. Those who bully me won't have a good time from tomorrow onwards. Everyone will start to worship me again and pay attention to me. But you have to break the rules. You deserve to die. You deserve to die." Bojo lowered her head to meet the girl's eyes. She wasn't human anymore. She had started to rot from the moment she had used feelings as an excuse to hurt him to satisfy her vanity. This had nothing to do with her age. She was selfish. Bojo didn't say a word. She lifted her up and smiled. I'm different from the Almighty. I can hit women. Bang. There was another loud bang. Bojo pushed her away, running towards the direction where Kwang had disappeared without turning back. But it was too late. She glanced over. There wasn't a single person around. Kwang had disappeared. The student's hypnosis was still there. That was the most dangerous part. Chapter 1234. Bojo wore her Bluetooth earpiece and took out the equipment she had prepared. Her first reaction was to lock onto Lee Jin's location. There was no response. He was still at home. There was no response from the listening device she had secretly installed on his computer. Did that mean Kwang hadn't contacted him? Could it be that her reasoning was wrong? Bojo shut her eyes. The only thing left in her mind was the calendar she had seen at Lee Jin's house. That circle of red. No, her deduction wasn't wrong. There had to be something she hadn't noticed. What exactly was it? Bojo tightened her grip on her phone. Her identity had been exposed and there was no point in hiding anymore. A glint flashed past her eyes as she clicked on the group information. The teacher came over, asking which class she was from, and why she wasn't at night revision at this hour. Bojo held onto the railing with one hand, and leaped over the field. She jumped down from the 1-meter-high stands, her uniform fluttering in the wind. The teacher. Bojo didn't turn back, using her fastest speed to enter the classroom. At this moment, everyone received Lee Jin's message. After finding out that the transfer student had been chosen as the new clown, some were shocked, some frowned, some didn't want to participate, and some were excited. Regardless of their emotions, they had to follow the rules. Some of the more straightforward students were the happiest, since the youngster was cold and handsome. They were happy to have a chance to embarrass him. It was a good chance for the youngster to know their school's tradition. Everyone was thinking of ways to prank Bojo. Now that the youngster had entered, they glanced at each other. One of them stretched out his leg without a change in expression, wanting to kick Bojo. However, to everyone's surprise, the young man lifted his leg and kicked the stool, sending the person who had stretched out his leg flying back together with the stool. There was a loud bang. Everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. One of the girls who had tried to splash water on Bojo was pinned onto the table. In an instant, the classroom was empty. Everyone watched the scene unfold before them. The youngster's black hair was wet, dripping down her chin. At this moment, the youngster grabbed onto the wrist of the person who had tried to sneak an attack with the baseball bat. Then she exerted strength with her long legs. The person flew out with a bang. The baseball bat landed in the youngster's hand. Bojo didn't restrain herself. With a loud swoosh, she raised the baseball bat and pointed it at everyone who was looking at her. She asked nonchalantly, "Who else wants to play?" No one dared to move. Even though the 5 of them had been hypnotized in the past, none of them dared to rush over. One of them had already been crippled. The other 4 were unsure of the identity of the young man in front of them. Why was he so good at fighting? After all, according to the information they had obtained, this person was quite ordinary. "You're not fighting anymore?" Bojo held the baseball bat, a smile on her face. "I don't like fighting." The 3 who were beaten to the ground were speechless. "Since you're done fighting, let's have a chat." Bojo stood on the podium since it was safer to have a wall behind her. "I heard you have a king here?" No one spoke. Bojo twirled the baseball bat. "Are you happy to be bullied, manipulated, or even controlled? Then you guys are really stupid. When you guys enter society in the future, MLM organizations will probably like you a lot. After all, every scam is accurate." "What did you say?" Some of the girls couldn't stand it. They retorted with a flushed face. "Who do you think you are?" Bojo replied slowly, "I'm no one. I'm not your parent or teacher. I don't have the responsibility to teach you how to be a person." "That's good. I can beat you up whenever I want." That's great." The girl was speechless for a long time after hearing his words. Someone stood up. It was the class monitor. "You're a guy and you dare to bully a girl?" Bojo laughed lightly. To me, scum doesn't matter if they're male or female. If you don't like our class, you can leave. The class monitor pushed his spectacles. He laughed coldly. Bojio glanced up at the clock hanging on the wall. You'll probably be the first to leave. What do you mean? Before the squad leader could finish his sentence, the door at the back of the classroom was kicked open. The people who came in were all special forces with their faces covered. When the squad leader saw this, he raised his hand and wanted to grab someone as a hostage. However, the special forces wouldn't give him the chance. It was the same for the other four. Bojio pointed out all of them. Take them away. That's right. Bojio's actions were to stall for time and divert the attention of the five of them, so that they couldn't do anything else. At the same time, Li Jin and Lu Jianing were also arrested. The rest weren't easy to deal with. Even though they knew that there was a case of campus violence, they couldn't do anything about it. Without the victim standing up to speak, it was hard to say anything about this kind of civil matter. Before the students could react, it was over. Before the students could react, it was already over. Your king will disappear. Bojio didn't leave. She remained at the podium, leaning on the baseball bat, her eyes glistening. Let me ask you again, do you really like to be used by others? A girl at the back clenched her fists. What right do you have to say that king is using us? Because everything you do is harmful to others. Would a good person allow you to do such things? Bojio glanced up, her gaze deep. Everyone is selfish. It's in their nature, but don't be so foolish. You are a student. Don't you know what a student should do? Study more, at least you can grow some brains. Your parents are paying for you to study. Are they for you to show off or to bully others? Do you know what your parents are worried about? They are worried that you won't have enough money to spend, that you won't have face in front of your classmates, and that you will be bullied. It doesn't matter if your conscience has been fed to a dog for that little bit of attention. You even think that you're especially smart. If you're smarter, you should study hard and make yourself more outstanding. You should make more sincere friends in school and play games with your parents when you're bored. There are so many entertainment options out there, but you just have to gather together to create flatulence. Didn't your king tell you that only sneaky rats act like this? Why you? The girl's shoulders trembled. Bojio remained calm, interrupting her. You can't win me in an argument. Chapter 1235. When the students heard the youngster's last sentence, they couldn't help but want to laugh. You can't beat me in an argument. There was no one else. Ha 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 ha. A round-faced girl laughed out loud, her laughter getting louder and louder. In the end, she stopped laughing and stood up. I don't want to, but I have no choice. Every time I see someone being bullied, I want to stop it, but do you know what the consequences are? I will be the one being ostracized, and I'm afraid. I believe anyone would be afraid since we aren't as strong as you. The girl thought that the youngster would retort back. Unexpectedly, the youngster laughed. Don't forget, you're all in the same class. In my memory, school is like this. No one is allowed to bully the people in our class. If you dare to cross class to cause trouble, I don't care which year you are from or if you're older than me, you have to kneel before me. If I can't beat you, I still have the power of the whole class behind me. We're not together to bully anyone, but to tell everyone that you can't bully us like this. We have to be friendly with each other. Boys protect girls. When it's time for a boy to stand up, a boy shouldn't be a coward. What would it look like for the whole class to bully one person? Who knows, if you stand up and help someone, someone might fall in love with you. Oh right, don't you students like the plot of the hero saving the damsel in distress? If you use it in real life, you can even get rid of the title of bachelor earlier. What do you mean by students? You don't sound like a student. A boy caressed his nose before asking, is it really useful? Bojio replied leisurely. You can ask the girl beside you who is blushing. If you really don't understand, you can read more romance novels to understand a young lady's heart. Of course, a young lady's heart is usually based on looks. With that, the students couldn't help but burst into laughter once more. A few Special Forces soldiers stood outside the door, glancing at each other. In the end, their gazes landed on the silhouette in a suit. Captain, that guy. Psychological counseling. We're investigating psychological cases. It's obvious that these students are more or less sick. There might be some hopeless people in this class, but at the same time, there are some people who don't want to be like that. Haven't you noticed that the atmosphere in the classroom is much better than before? The figure walked over with a smirk on his face. It's really rare. I didn't expect to see the cold-blooded and heartless Z giving psychological counseling to a bunch of students. Based on her personality in the past, she would probably only do it and not say anything. Qin Mo's existence really softened her. Special forces. That guy had crippled 3 people and was still teaching students how to fall in love. Captain, are you sure this is gentleness? Wasn't he just creating trouble for the school? He facepalmed. Perhaps only the figure could understand Bojio's intentions. A conversation could temporarily resolve the crisis that had erupted. In psychology, this was known as the golden time for treatment. Communication happened at the moment. Of course, there would still be such people among the students. The kind of people who clearly knew that their actions were hurting others, but they didn't feel anything. One could tell from their expressions. The reason Kwang could leave so easily was probably because the time was ripe. With just a small catalyst, something would germinate in his heart, and he would use the hypnosis to kidnap the hostages. They had to find out the source of the catalyst. If they couldn't solve this problem, everything they had done before would be in vain. There were so many students in the school. Even if only 1 out of 10 of them was hypnotized, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, more than 70% of the students had already changed. The figure was right, that was indeed Kwang's plan. However, he hadn't expected his identity to be recognized by a high school student. If someone hadn't rushed over in time, he would have fallen into the other party's hands. Kwang, who was already in the jeep, narrowed his eyes. His fingers slid across the screen again, the pain from his leg making him smile. He seemed to be enjoying the feeling. If you had died in that school, Qin Mo wouldn't be in this state. It's such a pity that such a smart person would be buried with him. Kwang wasn't aware that Li Jin had been arrested. But in his eyes, it didn't matter even if all the chess pieces were arrested. After all, the key to the hypnosis wasn't in their hands. What was meant to happen would happen. No one would be able to detect it, and no one would be able to stop it. Unless Qin Mo went over. But it was too late. He loved this feeling. The sky had turned completely dark. It was just past midnight, a few hours away from dawn. Kwang leaned back, his refined face tainted by the darkness of the night. In the interrogation room, the headlights were blinding. Li Jin glanced at the youngster sitting opposite him, his gaze wavering. How did you do it? Bojio arched a brow. What? It's impossible that you didn't touch my things in my house. How did you restore it to its original state? Li Jin's face was pale and malnourished. No, I should be asking why my mother allowed you in and kept you for so long. How did you do it? Bojio placed the documents down. At this stage, Li Jin was more concerned about the questions. Kwang was indeed good at picking people, and the other party was smart. It's simple. With an outsider around, your stepfather wouldn't lay a hand on your mother. Bojio's words caused Li Jin's expression to change. He tightened his grip on the cup. The people outside the interrogation room were surprised. After all, they had been interrogating Li Jin for 7 hours. They had asked and answered all the questions. Li Jin's emotions hadn't changed from the beginning to the end, saying that he didn't know or wasn't clear no matter what they asked. The scariest thing in an interrogation was this type of criminal. They wouldn't be able to get anything valuable out of him. But he was still young. How could such a young person cause them to feel suffocated? They were at their wits' end. They hadn't expected the youngster to change his expression with just 2 sentences. This was a good thing in an interrogation. At the very least, resistance was a form of leaking information. Chapter 1236. Hearing this, the people in the police station looked at each other. It was obvious that this wasn't a fair exchange. But even so, they couldn't reject him directly, because in the hands of the other party, there was information related to the safety of the entire school. This wasn't just a small city. Even if it was in the entire country, it would be a huge matter. If anything were to happen, None of them would be able to bear the responsibility. Under such circumstances, they could only call for an emergency meeting. The detectives have found some evidence. Li Jin might have some crucial information in his hands. No one knows what will happen if we don't agree to him. If the incident from 3 years ago happens again, the consequences will be unimaginable. But if we agree to his request, we might be releasing a tiger back into the mountains. Can we get someone to follow him? The investigation team has thought of this, but Li Jin is a little sinister. I'm afraid he's up to something. His request to let him off isn't as simple as it seems. He's a smart kid. He's asking us to send him out on camera. That's the only way he'll tell us what the hypnosis Kwang left behind is through text messages. Which means we can't be sure if he will send us the message after he leaves. Yes. The officer in the middle massaged his temples. Let's raise our hands to decide. Let's see if more people agree or disagree. No one moved. No one wanted to make the decision since it wasn't right. Time trickled by. Compared to when he was first brought in, Li Jin had a bigger smile on his face. That kind of smile hanging on his bloodless face would always make people feel uncomfortable from the bottom of their hearts. The more he behaved, the more worried they became. They weren't sure how many students like Li Jin were in the school. They couldn't find out. There were too many. Or perhaps some people might look like that on the surface, but deep down, they were different. For the first time, they felt helpless. It was an indescribable feeling. A police officer leaned against the wall, probably too tired. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, asking the person beside him, "What do you think happened to the kids these days? Perhaps the environment is different. Go get something to eat. It's going to be dawn in less than 2 hours. I'll watch over them." The police had sent a lot of people to keep an eye on the school, just to prevent any unexpected incidents from happening. Li Jin didn't think much of it and even laughed. Teacher said that when you're handling a case, you like to take precautions. It's useless. No matter what you do, you won't be able to win against teacher. If you don't want to see mass suicides, it's better to follow my instructions. Let me go. I'll give you the information you want. Li Jin's voice could be heard in the meeting room. Everyone's expression changed, thinking anxiously about what they should do. More importantly, they didn't know who had released the news online. They said that they were thinking of ways to rescue a group of students with psychological problems, and for that, they were willing to release the criminals. Soon, the netizens started leaving comments. After seeing what happened to this school, I really can't believe there's such a school. Are the students here normal? This kind of student will harm others if he comes out. To save this kind of person, we have to release criminals. This is not right in itself. It's good that they are gone. I don't understand. That's right, such people should go to hell. The comments online intensified, many of them furious. The special investigation team was already in a terrible predicament, and now they had to deal with such things. It was obvious how much pressure they were under. The person in the middle finally made a decision. Inform the subordinates, let. Before he could finish his sentence, a voice rang out in the interrogation room. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the interrogation room. The voice neither loud nor soft, carrying the unique quality of a youngster. Li Jin, let's stop here. You have no idea what kind of hypnosis Kwang has planted in you. This is? The people in the meeting room started to stir. One of them, who hadn't spoken since the start, stood up. Why don't you listen? Someone wanted to stop them, but when he saw the person's face, he swallowed his words. Why was the young master of the Tang family here? In the interrogation room, Li Jin hadn't expected someone to say something like that. He clenched his fists under the table. Why didn't I know? I'm the person the teacher trusts the most here. He left everything to me, even allowing me to use the spies he planted in the class. If you don't want to let him go, just say it. I don't care if I can't get out or not. Li Jin, there's a limit to lying to yourself. Bojio walked over, her eyes glistening. I went to your room again just now. You don't seem to know much about hypnosis. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such a basic book on it. You and I both know that if the teacher you mentioned cared a little, he wouldn't have left so easily. In his eyes, you are indeed more useful than others since you are intelligent. But regardless of whether a chess piece is useful or not, she is still his wife. For someone like Kuang, he would keep all his secrets to himself. Why would he allow a chess piece to know everything? I'm afraid the only thing you know is that something is going to happen today. Other than that, you don't know anything else. Since you understand your teacher so well, do you know where he is from, what he has been through, and what kind of business he does? Li Jin chuckled, his expression starting to look forced. Why should I tell you? Chapter 1237. After hearing Bo Jio's words, the entire conference room became extremely quiet. They wanted to move, but they were interrupted by Li Jin's laughter. It was an abnormal laughter. He pressed both hands on the table, the green in his eyes glaring. You're right, I want them to be afraid. What's the point of them living? What do you know? They destroyed everything I had. Don't they deserve to die? I just want to study properly. What have they done? They laugh at me all day long. Don't they think I'm easy to bully? Then they should all go to hell. And you, speaking of which, you should be the same as me. Don't deny it. Your scheming is no less than anyone else's. I don't see any intention of saving those people, do I? I heard from Lu Jianing that you almost kicked her to death. It seems like we're the same. Those people aren't worth saving. Why do you have to hide your true feelings? The meeting room was in an uproar. Someone was about to stand up. Indeed, there are some people who aren't worth saving. For instance, Lu Jianing, her life has nothing to do with me. But there are many people in school who remain silent because they don't know how to handle such a situation. They want to help you, but they aren't strong enough. You have to allow people to protect themselves. That isn't wrong. We are the same in nature, but we have different principles. I won't let so many innocent people die just because I want to kill a few pieces of trash. Li Jin looked at the youngster in front of him, slowly returning to his seat, his voice fading. No one has thought of helping me. Even my mom would suppress the matter of me being bullied in order to please her current husband. Young masters with parents like you, how would you understand how people like us feel? I attended secondary school overseas, Bo Jio said calmly. Back then, foreigners were very anti-Chinese. Besides, I didn't have parents, so many people came looking for trouble. In China, you were at least as tall as them and wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a fight. I was the same as you. I didn't have any friends back then, and I didn't have any classmates to stand up for me since I was the only one with black eyes and black hair. But so what? Are you going to soften and call someone daddy just because you're beaten black and blue? Or are you so scared that you become a coward when you see someone stronger than you that you don't even dare to protect your mother? It was very simple to deal with people who ostracized you. If they didn't want to talk to you, then don't talk to them either. Communication was so advanced. Who did they think they were? If you're not in the same circle, there's no need to force yourself to fit into the same circle. Bowing and scraping will only make people look down on you more and more. If no one cherishes you, don't tell me you don't cherish yourself. How old were they? Did they still think that life was a fairy tale? The rule of survival is simple. Here. Bo Jio reached her hand out, tapping his spine. You have to stay straight no matter what. Li Jin couldn't describe the feeling. Chapter 1238. Li Jin's words were too late. Everyone's heart sank. Bo Jio was probably the calmest. That was because Li Jin was right. They were the same. Those who hadn't experienced those things wouldn't understand what it meant to be alone and helpless. When injustice was done to us, they would always think that the law was too far away and the fist was too close. It wasn't that they hadn't thought of resistance, but the resistance would be drowned out by other voices. Those who committed crimes shared the same traits. They were vain and would distort the truth. This had nothing to do with age and wasn't a dark side. They were just like that. Those who clamor that I am but what I have done are merely exculpating themselves of guilt. When they met such shameless people, it was important to know how to react. That was the most important thing to do when they met such shameless people. Similarly, they shouldn't be filled with hatred. You could try to become stronger, or even look at yourself in the mirror to see if there was anything you needed to improve. Be it your personality, the way you spoke, or sometimes, your heart was just too weak. When you met with difficulties, you couldn't blame it on the circumstances. The kind of life you wanted to live depended on whether you were working hard. Bojio knew that even now, there would still be people in that school who didn't think much of what they had done. But at the same time, Bojio knew other than them, there were many others who didn't know what they were doing. For a long time, she wasn't sure what she was doing. She had even forgotten what her father had said. She thought, there would always be someone in this world who would pull you up when you fell into the endless darkness. If no one was willing to be that person, what would happen in the future? Bojio was a person who wandered in the darkness, just a figure. When he gradually became clear, you would understand that there were things you had to do. Even if there was a 0.1% chance that this kindness would be repaid to that person. I never believed that the world was bright, but I believe that I can create light. These were the last words she left Li Jin. Everyone is the same. As they walked out of the interrogation room, every minute became more and more pressing. There wasn't any valuable information from Li Jin. The only news in the meeting room was the one Bojio had provided. The youngster believed that Kwang's hypnosis would be activated today, but there wasn't any evidence as to how it would be activated. What was even more unbelievable was that it was Li Jin's intuition. No one could understand why the young man would believe a criminal's intuition. Alright, even if we all believe it, what should we do next? Tell every parent to keep an eye on their children? Someone rubbed his temples. That's not realistic. There are too many students in the school and some of their parents aren't even in the city. Even if they are, we don't know how Kwang would activate them. If the news were to spread, it would only cause a greater impact. The more unsettled the students are, the more unstable their mental states would be. By then, the situation would only worsen, and who would be responsible for it? Bojio laughed, a hint of mockery in her voice. In the end, you're just afraid of taking responsibility? That person's expression changed. Let me. The person sitting in the middle said. I'll bear all the responsibility, as long as I can save them. But this isn't the time to agitate them. Child, you should know that announcing the news isn't a good idea. Indeed, it would only make the danger more uncontrollable. Bojio stood up. I'll look for more information. Up until now, this was the only way. The clock hung on the wall pointed to 6 a.m. On this day, no one slept. The examiners flipped through the information over and over again. There were even specialized people observing the students to see if there were any differences. Everything was normal. Even a psychiatrist couldn't tell the difference. From 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., all the students had finished their breakfast. The day students had also arrived at the school gate at this time. Of course, there were students who were late. But no matter how one looked at it, the school seemed to be thriving. How could anything have happened? Could he have made a mistake and it isn't today? In the camouflaged nanny van, one of the officers nudged his colleague's arm, lowering his voice as he gestured for him to look at the youngster in the passenger seat. The youngster was holding onto an iPad, the images of Li Jin's interview and the occasional images of the school doctor. Kwang was meticulous and it was obvious. There weren't many images of him on the iPad, all of them from afar. Outside the car window, the sound of the students fighting could be heard through the wind. Indeed, there wasn't a single trace of abnormality. Was she thinking too much? Bojio shut her eyes. She wasn't sure if it was because she had stayed up late for the past 2 days, but her nose was stuffy and her head was dizzy. She was slightly tired. Her thoughts were heavy. Faintly, she dreamt of the time when she was at home. He had tilted his head and explained physics to her. You can apply the formula to any question as long as you use it flexibly. In that case, she replied lazily. After all, she wasn't interested in physics, she was only interested in people. There are so many questions, I'm getting dizzy. He held the side of his face and slapped her forehead. No matter how complicated the description of the question is, you just need to remember one thing. Figure out the real intention of the person who came up with the question. The rest of the description is just a smokescreen, idiot. Beep, beep, beep. The ear-piercing sound of a car engine could be heard. All of a sudden, Bojio opened her eyes. We seem to be blocking someone's car. It's 8:10 p.m., the students should be in by now, let's move the car. Bojio listened to the noise, her head still heavy and her breathing became difficult. She tilted her head up and drank a mouthful of mineral water. That was when she remembered that her body wasn't healthy. Fortunately, she could handle it. The water flowed down her throat, making her feel better. Bojio glanced out of the car window. The bustling school entrance was now empty, and the guards were closing the doors. She wasn't sure if it was the influence of the dream. Bojio tapped on Li Jin's recording again, the sentence still lingering in her mind. Understand the intention of the person who came up with the question. Suddenly, Bojio paused on the mass suicide that Li Jin had mentioned. No, that wasn't right. That wasn't Kwang's true intention. Kwang wanted hostages to rush towards him so that he could be safe. Mass. Chapter 1239. Swoosh. Bojio reached out to pull the car door open and jumped out. She only said, "Follow me." Her sudden action caused the driver to break out in cold sweat. He was just about to board the train. The people at the back glanced at each other before pulling the car door open. They gritted their teeth as they ran. The conference room was connected to the commotion. When someone heard the commotion, he straightened. "What's wrong?" "We don't know either." That youngster suddenly jumped out of the car. The guard didn't understand what Bojio was thinking. At this moment, the railing at the school gate was lowered. Bojio didn't hesitate. She held onto the railing with one hand and leaped over. She was still wearing her school uniform. As soon as the guard's voice rang out, he saw two people behind the young man leaping in as well. The key point was that they raised their IDs. The guard was stunned. What was going on? There was a broadcast in the school. The general content was for the students to take their stools and take their seats according to the formation of each class. The sound got softer and softer. It seemed like it had been arranged. Bojio's speed doubled once more. Because of the word large scale. Even though the hypnosis could be activated at any time. But if it was large scale, the entire school would be watching the movie today. What Kwang wanted wasn't to trigger the hypnosis individually. If that was the case, any time would be fine. Once the hostages were gone, they would lose their value. In a large-scale riot and stampede, even if there were guards around, they wouldn't be able to stop a portion of the students from jumping into the car and leaving after receiving the hypnosis. Their actions would be large-scale. If everyone ran in the same direction, even if they were running towards the criminals, they wouldn't be able to open fire. That was Kwang's motive. He wanted everyone to know that they would be holding this batch of hostages outside the border. This way, once everyone knew about it, regardless of who was going to take action, they would have to rescue these hostages because they were still children. And the only way to stop all of this was to cut off the broadcast. Bojio ran towards the sound. At this moment, the sound of the movie entering could be heard. In the distance, the projection teacher watched in confusion as a student ran over. He frowned, thinking that it was someone from another class who was late. Bojio glanced over. No matter how fast she was, it would take at least a minute to reach the broadcast location. It was too late. If he ran over, it would indeed be too late. Moreover, the teachers in charge of maintaining order were already walking towards her. Because of this, people didn't even notice the frequent small movements of the students when they saw the scenes and sounds played in the movie. Those actions were really normal, and there was nothing bad about the movie. But everything reminded her of the most famous hypnosis case. In the beginning, when the audience listened to the drumming, they only felt that their emotions were higher than usual, and they would make some small movements from time to time. However, as time went on, they became more and more uncontrollable, to the point that no one knew why these people became restless in the end and wanted to escape from the scene, resulting in a sudden large-scale stampede. Chapter 1240. This student. The physical education teacher walked over with his hands on his waist. He probably wanted her to return to her seat. In a crowded place, the airflow wouldn't be high. No one expected Bojio to stop. She raised her hand to put on her mask. Then she glanced up, the military dagger in her hand unsheathing with a swoosh. It flew straight towards a tree next to the screen. That was the main switch that controlled all the electricity. The volume of the video was very loud. Other than a portion of the teachers, no other students noticed this scene. The only thing they could feel was, after the sound of paw. The screen turned black, and the sound stopped. Their thoughts seemed to have been pulled back from somewhere. All the students blinked, then turned their heads to talk to the people next to them. What's going on? Is there a power outage? I'm not sure. Could it be a power outage? In that instant, the field was in an uproar. Some of the students stood up to check on the situation. Some lowered their heads to play games. Some turned back to ask for snacks from their roommates. Even though the discipline wasn't that strict, fortunately, nothing terrible had happened. They remained in their original positions. Some of them might have been confused about why they had been so angry a moment ago, but now that the feeling had disappeared, they rubbed their chests in confusion. On the other side, the physical education teacher was about to break down. He shouted loudly, "You little brat! Do you know what you have done, Aishi?" It wasn't easy for him to be in charge of the school's video broadcast. He had made such a huge mistake. His internship period was going to be extended. Seriously. The physical education teacher raised his arms, grabbing his hair in anger. Bojio laughed. This kind of teacher was undoubtedly cute in her eyes. In reality, regardless of the occupation, there would be good and bad people. Some people in the education system would do anything to earn money. But similarly, there were some people who became teachers because they hoped to become good teachers. Hence, they often thought about how to interact with the children of this era, and how to help them develop in a better direction. The Almighty was right. Everyone's eyes were the same. It depended on what you were looking for. But cutting off the electricity in public was a challenge to the school's authority. The Dean of Academic Affairs walked over, and was about to speak. The two plainclothes officers rushed over, one hand on their knees while the other raised their identification documents, panting heavily. This is our colleague." The dean's eyes widened. This kid was obviously wearing their school uniform, and she was so young. How could she be from the police? "There's something wrong with the video. How many of these videos are there in the school? Destroy all of them and ban them from being shown in the future. I'll bring the sample back." From a certain perspective, Bojio wasn't willing to be associated with the police. What a joke, she was in the underworld. Why would she be friendly with her natural enemy? "There's something wrong with the film?" The teacher in charge of the screening was dumbfounded. What problem could there be with the movie? It was all normal. There was nothing like 18K. How could there be a problem? The two guards were also a little embarrassed. After all, there was nothing wrong with the contents of the films. Chapter 1241. The guard tugged Bojio's sleeves. "Are you sure it's a problem with the film?" "I'm sure." Bojio's tone was calm. "Disperse the students and get them to return to their classrooms. Also, get someone to get a psychiatrist to do a test." The guard didn't say anything else since his superiors had instructed him to listen to the youngster. Even though they didn't know where he had come from, this was the best they could do given the current situation. The school would be able to cooperate with them if they explained. Actually, the students had their own thoughts. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen the news online. It was just a different reaction. Some of them felt that Li Jin was a toad. They were giving him face by teaching him a lesson. What was he going to do to them? Some of them were scared to death since some of them wanted to join in the fun. They wanted to be more friendly in the future. Some of them wore their headphones and closed their eyes. They told themselves that they wouldn't bully anyone in the future, and that they would be the one to stand out when they could. It was just that no one knew that the danger had already been resolved without them even knowing. The film was brought to the meeting room. Bojio and the other 3 famous psychologists were present. In the end, they came to a unanimous conclusion. The film was indeed fine. If the target group was the students, then there would be a huge problem. After all, they already had the previous setting. Bullying and being bullied. Ostracization, vanity, attention. That's all they wanted. That was the problem. Firstly, there was an image that stimulated one's perception. It was very simple. Everyone would have a different view of this matter when they looked at it. Based on your personality, you would be able to relate to it. They played the video for Lu Jianing to watch. In less than 3 minutes, she became very violent. After all, they were born to compare and wanted to get attention. If you provoked them, they would have a very strong backlash. That wasn't all. The sound of the film seemed normal, but if you listened to it separately, you would realize that the sound effects were extremely rushed. It was easy to trigger people's emotions. If it hadn't been interrupted in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. They came to a conclusion. The three psychologists were also shocked. Everyone who studied criminal psychology would know about the case from abroad. However, such cases were not common. How could that child be so young? How did he know? Just as the three psychologists were about to question someone, they realized that the youngster was no longer in the conference room. The safety of the students was finally secured. After the hypnosis was removed, the local psychological agency would find some students to talk to. Those who had been violent and humiliating others, but still felt that they had done nothing wrong, would go through the legal process and be sent to the juvenile detention center. Some people said that it was too strict. Anyway, the matter had passed. They were just some children. What did they know? First of all, those who are over 10 years old and do not have a sense of right and wrong should not call themselves children. At the very least, the 5-year-old babies would express their dissatisfaction. Furthermore, no matter how small it was not an excuse for them to feel that it was okay to hurt someone. Moreover, this wasn't simply being ignorant. They were enjoying forming a gang to seize, possess, and bully others. It was time for these people to receive their just desserts. No one was born a murderer. It was just that he didn't care this time, and he didn't care next time. Over time, some things would become more and more unscrupulous. Those who said that the matter was over were probably kind-hearted and had good intentions. But sometimes, ignorant kindness would only help the murderer to form. It wasn't a big deal to teach them a lesson when they made a mistake. When they thought about the people they had bullied, everything would be fair. But for such a huge case to be solved, someone had to make a big contribution. Who would have thought that the youngster would disappear that afternoon? At this moment, Bojo was hunching her back. She pulled off her jacket and threw away her school uniform. She changed into a black suit. Her figure was so straight that it was impossible to tell how she looked like before. She faced the car window and twisted the tie on her shirt. Her hair fell down, completely displaying the advantage of her face. Bojo was dressed this way because she had received a voice message from young Master Chin. "I have good news for you. Treat it as a reward for your work." The informant in the MT region sent news. Actually, even if you hadn't appeared, Kwang would have gone back yesterday because he had to meet a very rich Chinese man. I heard that the Chinese man is very extravagant. The moment he arrived in Country Tea, he bought a huge cruise ship and a huge batch of firearms to protect himself. He wanted to buy good goods locally. Of course, the Chinese man's identity isn't clear. What we know is that he's a rich second-generation heir with a powerful family background. He also has a very capable investment consultant by his side. So here's the question, who do you think he is? Was there a need to guess? Such a nouveau riche, it couldn't be anyone else other than Prince. As for the extremely capable investment consultant, it should be the Almighty. After all, the Almighty's abstinence didn't seem out of place at all. Bojo raised her hand to buckle the sensor watch. Her eyes seemed to be glowing as she entered the Lamborghini. She closed the door casually and entered a few words on the navigation system. A voice notification floated over. The specific address has been confirmed. The entire journey is 800 miles, and there is sufficient fuel. Let's go. Bojo turned the steering wheel with one hand and did a beautiful drift. At this moment, she didn't look like the student she had been before. She was a rich playboy, but because of her suit, she carried a hint of business aura. "Master, your heartbeat is too fast. Are you so happy because there's news of the Demon King?" Bojo nodded. "Master, your heartbeat is too fast. Is there news of the Demon King?" "Little Blackie, I realize that even though most of the time your intelligence isn't enough, you're pretty smart this time." Bojo increased the speed of the car, unable to suppress the smile on her face. "Not bad. Little Blackie." It didn't feel like it was being complimented. It felt as though it was being forced to swallow a bowl of dog food. Life wasn't going to be easy. If they really met the devil, They wouldn't be receiving, and kissing in the car, would they? The moment little Blackie imagined the scene, the headlights started to flicker. Chapter 1242. In the cruise ship. The sudden ringing of the phone. This caused the few people who were training to stop their movements one after another. Chin Emo glanced at the boss on the surface. Answer it. Prince glanced at the caller ID, waiting for the people beside him to put on their earphones before answering. Hello. Hello. It was Scorpion's number, but at this moment the voice changed. I heard that you are interested in doing business with me. Prince maintained his carefree persona. Who are you? Kwang. The moment the two words came out, Prince stiffened. Prince froze, his expression changing in an instant. Why? Don't you know me? Kwang seemed to be guessing his thoughts all the time. That was the reason he gave off such an oppressive aura. Prince listened to the voice beside his ear. Unknowingly, he felt a chill at the back of his neck. If his boss hadn't been sitting in front of him, tapping the table, he probably wouldn't have known how to reply. Of course I know you. Prince smiled. I've heard many legends about this title in the MT region. However, I'm most interested in how many good items you have. Kwang didn't come to a conclusion. He glanced down at the crippled person and took the handkerchief from the person beside him. He wiped the blood off his fingers, not saying a word. Instead, he turned around and shook his finger. Only an ah sound could be heard. The scream of pain shocked not only Prince, but also Magician and the others. Their fingers froze. Chin Emo was the only one who didn't move. He just sat there, his face elegant, as though he wouldn't be surprised no matter what he heard. At this moment, Kwang chuckled. I'm really sorry, I just settled some internal matters and caused a commotion. I had no choice. There are always people trying to sneak in. This time, it was the special forces from China. They thought I wouldn't be able to find them. It's really... Kwang didn't finish his sentence. But through that painful scream, Prince could imagine what it was like on the other side. He couldn't control himself, clenching his fists. Magician gritted his teeth as well. Everyone was furious, including Wolf, who had always been indifferent. Prince couldn't take it anymore. He tilted his head, his breathing rising. Chin Emo was one step ahead of him, reaching out to block the microphone. The deepness in his eyes was like a calming stone, allowing Prince to adjust himself. Then he smiled. Is he really a fool? They've always been like this. I caught a few of them, and threw them into the high seas to feed the fish. Kwang's voice was gentle. I didn't expect us to have the same thoughts in this aspect. But my way of handling things is slightly different from yours. I won't feed them to the sea. The injured ones will be more useful as hostages. Do you think the Huaxia Special Forces will think of a way to save their comrades? Prince's fingers tightened, but he had to maintain the image of a nouveau riche. Who cares if they come to save us? That's your concern. I only care if I can earn money. Chapter 1243. I will send the address to Your Excellency's mobile phone later, and someone will bring Your Excellency here to inspect the goods. Remember to prepare the first deposit, Your Excellency. With that, Kwang hung up the phone. He was still wearing his white coat as he glanced at the computer screen and the subsequent reports. What he had planned hadn't happened. The important chess piece that should have called him at this time seemed to have gone missing. The large-scale trampling incident he had wanted to see was like a mist. It hadn't even appeared. What did this mean? Kwang knew it clearly. This meant that none of the hostages he had found would appear. The students hadn't come to the border. The off-road vehicle he had prepared had lost its purpose. At the start, Kwang had assumed that China was trying to calm the public, suppressing the news and not reporting it. But after he had received the news, he realized that someone had ruined his plans. Someone had ruined everything he had prepared for such a long time. Kwang's gaze gradually turned cold. His eyes were like a snake's, filled with a sinister aura. The sun in the MT region had always been bright. But no matter how bright the sun was, Scorpion could feel the anger emanating from the person in front of him. Bang! Kwang raised his gun, turning to shoot a bullet at one of the informants. Then he smiled. I never expected the person Qin Mo fancied to be so capable. But it doesn't matter, it's all thanks to him that we managed to obtain such useful information. With that, he hefted the communication device in his hand. Anyone who contacted the outside world would leave a record. He had purposely asked Fanjia to lower her standards. He hadn't expected to catch a rat. He wasn't sure who the message was sent to, but he was very interested in the contents. After all, the Chinese businessman had been mentioned. It seemed like the other party was very concerned about his business. Didn't this mean that there was something wrong with this group of people? Kuwang's heart sank. He ordered his men to capture the person who had spread the news for the Chinese businessman. With one look he understood. Even though the person had denied colluding with anyone before his death, Kuwang didn't believe him. Of course, he couldn't deny that the Chinese businessman was real. But if the other party was fake, Qin Mo might be inside. Kuwang smiled, reaching out to wipe away the blood at the corner of his lips. If Qin Mo really existed, the exchange of information was extremely valuable. That's right, losing the student hostage was equivalent to losing half of the initiative. However, there was one thing that he had an absolute advantage over. He had already discovered the other party's identity, but the other party was still immersed in joy, thinking that everything was going smoothly. Kuwang walked over to the table, looking at the image on the screen. Suddenly he broke into a smile. Compared to those students, you are the most valuable hostage. It's a pity I didn't manage to kidnap you back, but when Qin Mo comes, any news about you would be enough to turn him into a different person. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for letting me discover you in school. Fanjia didn't speak, because she couldn't be more familiar with that image. She had been looking for this person for such a long time, but she did not expect that her master would be the first one to meet her. This was like a slap to her face. Go and make a video. Kuwang's voice was calm, he seemed to have finally adjusted his emotions. Wearing his white coat, he walked towards the computer screen. Use this footage and make some changes to the content. It's time for Qin Mo to have a second taste of what it feels like to lose something. If the Chinese businessman is really him, your video will come in handy. He didn't need to explain it clearly. Fanjia understood her master's intentions in the next second. Back then, she had pretended to be his childhood playmate to get close to him. She hadn't expected him to see through her in less than 10 days. But even so, they knew what his weakness was. They had to find that line of defense and destroy it completely, planting a psychological cue. Now her master was probably going to reactivate that psychological cue. If that was the case, that person's personality would change drastically and he would become one of them. With that thought, Fanjia couldn't suppress the smile on her face, her eyes glistening. I'll go and prepare now. On the cruise, after hanging up the phone, Prince kicked the chair in front of him away, his eyes filled with depression. Almost everyone present understood that feeling. Another comrade had been captured. He didn't even need to think to know what kind of cruel treatment he would receive from Kuwang. It was impossible not to be furious. Right now, everyone was thinking about capturing that thug, Kuwang, so that he wouldn't be able to do as he pleased in this world. There was only one person sitting on the chair, his long fingers tapping on the table as he listened to the recording of the phone call. After the third time he removed his earphones, standing tall and handsome. Kuwang is setting a trap for you. Every sentence is a test. From another angle, there is a problem, he is suspecting our identity, and you almost exposed yourself. Prince stilled, his eyes widening. He hadn't expected it to be so serious. He knew that Kuwang was purposely provoking him, but he hadn't thought much about it. Now that he had heard Qin Mo's words, Prince felt sweat dripping down his forehead. Kuwang was more unpredictable than they had imagined. If Kuwang is really suspecting our identity, boss, are we still going for the deal? Magician felt uneasy. Qin Mo stood up. Don't forget what the mission is. It's normal for us to be suspected. Kuwang is a suspicious person, and no one would immediately believe a Chinese person who has just entered the industry. Report the situation to the higher-ups. Fatty, check which special forces unit the captured soldiers belong to and which tourists are the hostages. We'll see how we can save them. Yes. The few of them split up, getting to work. The moment China received Qin Mo's news, they called for a meeting immediately. The atmosphere was tense. Whether to take action or not was a difficult decision to make. There were too many times when a decision had to be made, and it had to be made. If they hadn't received the news previously, they could have taken it as the Chinese tourists had all been massacred. But now they received the news. Kuang still had 17 ordinary tourists in his hands. The relatives of these tourists were all hoping for their return. They couldn't ignore such hopes. But at the same time, even though they knew Kuang was suspicious of Qin Mo and the others, they still sent the children to carry out the mission. They couldn't bear to do it. They were the top special forces in China. Their average age wasn't even 25 years old. Everyone knew that this was a mission that they might not be able to return from. General Qin wasn't the only one in the meeting. It was too difficult for them to make a decision. Indeed, it was too difficult. But all the spies had fallen. Now only this team was left. They were the closest to Kuang's lair. If they were fully prepared, they would be able to break the stalemate and lock onto Kuang's exact location. With the video evidence and the tourists still alive, they would be able to mobilize the foreign troops. But all of this required someone to go against Kuang. Otherwise, no one could be sure if the 17 tourists, including the spies that Kuang had captured, would still be alive. This was the situation everyone understood. At the same time, Bojio received 2 voice messages from young Master Tang. At this moment, Bojio was 500 kilometers away from the border. She drove the Lamborghini very fast, even exceeding the speed limit. Her eyes were unprecedentedly dark. Bojio was clear that even without this meeting, that person would have made the decision to save them. It was because of the clothes he was wearing. More importantly, he had said that the soldiers of China were born to save people. Little Blackie, Bojio turned and ordered. Help me get Hoshino's call. Yes, master. The navigation system changed and the internet connected automatically. The video wasn't a road map anymore. Instead, it was directed to a computer. The next moment, Hoshino's handsome face with a faint smile appeared in front of Bojio's eyes. He seemed to have just finished training. He was in his esports uniform, and there was a black earpiece on his ear. Bojio was used to seeing him in a sweater. Now that he had changed, it gave her a faint glow. It's rare that you would send me a video call directly. Hoshino, I need you to help me investigate a place. Bojio tilted her head. Her eyes were bright. Use the power of the entire hacker world. Hoshino paused. Then he smiled. I understand. I'm the only one here. The access is limited. Now connect to the regional network. Is it okay for me to log in with your account? It's okay. Bojio was straightforward. Hoshino's gaze turned warm. When Yusishin pushed the door open, this was the scene he saw. He didn't need to think to know who he was talking to. But Hoshino actually gestured for him to leave. Yusishin tied up his long hair. His sharp handsomeness made him exude a sense of coldness. Then he slammed the door. He didn't even want the cake he had bought. His long legs stepped on the pure black battle axe. The manager behind Yusishin was a little cautious. Young master, what's wrong? Isn't young master Hoshino around? Why isn't he around? He's kissing his lover. He probably doesn't have time to care about you. Why? Do you want to test my driving skills? When Yusishin said this, the corners of his eyes turned cold. Such a man could really make people feel scared. The manager remembered the person who wanted to touch young master's car. He broke one of his ribs. He hurriedly waved his hands. No, I'm just asking. Who did he offend? He felt so wronged. Yusishin didn't say anything. He glanced at the cake box that he had thrown. The more he looked at it, the more irritating he felt. He stepped on the accelerator. He was arrogant like a ball of fire. He didn't know who he would burn. Only young Master Hoshino could make the prince of the underworld reveal his emotions. The manager sighed. He didn't dare to ask why. Upstairs, Hoshino had already opened his laptop. Basically, as long as he had the young lord's instructions, it would be very easy to investigate a place. But the place they wanted to investigate today wasn't so easy to find. Because it was in the MT area, the ungoverned area of the Golden Triangle, everything became very complicated. First of all, This place wasn't developed. In addition, it was surrounded by dense forests. This meant that the communication here wasn't developed. In a place where communication wasn't developed, the internet wasn't widespread. To a hacker, in order to infiltrate a place, they had to have a network first. That way, it would be easier for them to operate. But here, because the network signal was too weak, in order to infiltrate, they had to find a suitable route. A few simple hackers definitely wouldn't be able to do it. But Bojo had said that they had to gather the power of the entire hacker world. This meant that this infiltration wasn't limited to one type of network. As long as there was a route, they would be able to infiltrate. But they still needed time, and it would take a long time. No one was sure if they would be able to find the place before their young lord arrived. Hoshino replied this question to Bojo. The next second, Bojo gave a solution. Try to start from the network operator. Starting from the network operator meant that as long as there was a signal, regardless of whether it was the main flow network or not, it would be detected. Many people said that hackers relied on their coding ability and hacking skills. That was indeed true. But there was another point that people often neglected. That was the thought process to infiltrate. A correct thought process to infiltrate could save a lot of time. And to a hacker, time was the deciding factor. With Bojo's thought process, hackers from all over the world quickly integrated the information and deleted it. In the end, it landed on a region. This region was west of the Mekong River. It was the largest natural forest. The last piece of information regarding Kawang had come from this place. Chapter 1244. Unless someone can destroy the signal interference equipment, Bojo interrupted Hoshino. She turned the steering wheel with one hand, her eyes as dark as the night sky. Hoshino, thank you. When he heard the last few words, Hoshino knew Bojo's decision. Similarly, he knew that as an assistant, he had to prepare everything. I will get someone to prepare the equipment for you before you enter the forest. But that place has always been heavily guarded. Our spies won't stay there for long. You will have to go to the designated location to get it. As Hoshino spoke, he had already entered the regional network. The hacker aristocrat clan sounded simple. But in reality, when you got to know them, you would realize that they never lacked manpower. This was arranged by the old steward. As long as there were people, there would be a supply point. This was the rule of the underworld. Any organization would obtain the information they needed from the hacker aristocrat clan. Correspondingly, they had to provide a certain level of protection. Of course, they wouldn't care about life and death, but they would always be conservative when it came to equipment. This was an unspoken understanding. In the past, there had been people who felt that the hacker aristocrat clan was just impressive on the internet. They were probably useless in real life. They wanted to break the rules and not provide the equipment needed to end the hacker aristocrat clan. Such an organization disappeared in front of everyone's eyes in less than a week. The hacker aristocrat clan sold information, but that didn't mean that they were weak. Everyone knew what kind of person the young lord of the hacker aristocrat was. Unless they had no other choice, they would never offend Z. After all, everyone helping each other out was what everyone in the underworld wanted to see. This was the same in the MT region. Just as Bojo drove towards the direction of the forest, the Supreme Council had made a decision, and the operation continued. This was Qin Mo's suggestion, because he knew very well what the current situation was. Perhaps every Special Forces soldier had been prepared for this from the very beginning. Regardless of what awaited them in front of them, they had to learn how to overcome it. If the mission was too dangerous, they wouldn't go for the rescue. That would probably go against the original intention of wearing this uniform. Qin Mo lifted his lids and looked at his soldier. None of them had any intention of not going. When they had heard that Kawang had Chinese compatriots, their first reaction had been to think of a way to save them. Qin Mo used a pen to draw an area on the map. According to the analysis of the information, Kawang would usually choose his old nest for a deal. The most important thing now is that no one knows the exact location of Kawang's old nest. Hence, we need to stall for time during the negotiation. The signal can't be detected? Fatty frowned. How are we going to retreat? Chapter 1245. He wanted him to show his fear towards the Devil King? Prince thought that it was too easy. However, he had never thought that he would have such an elder brother. Prince tried to put himself in the role of the little black boy. He felt that his boss might be strict, but at least he doted on his younger brother. Hence, he should be able to do whatever he wanted to. But reality proved that Prince was too naive. Just as he was about to give the devil a hug to show his brother's happiness, his boss glanced over. Boss glanced over with a cold gaze that made one's scalp numb. There's no need for physical contact. Prince glared. Then how are we going to show our brotherly love? I'll suppress you harshly. It's a sign of brotherhood, Chinemo replied slowly. Prince. He had been living in his fantasy for one more minute. His boss wasn't like this when he was with the little black boy. He would bring him water or carry sweets in his pocket. He would smile and pat his head whenever they didn't agree. Why was he suppressing him harshly? Check your belongings. Chinemo glanced over, his long fingers tapping on the table. According to Kwang's personality, he won't let us reach our destination directly. From the map, we have to take a boat first. Before that, we will have to alight from our own car and be blindfolded. Our belongings might be detected. Hence, we have to be careful and change all internal communication devices to watches. Wear a coat, especially the one Prince is wearing. Magician, from today onwards, you will have a habit. Magician was still in a daze. Chinemo had already prepared a poker card for him. You play poker all the time. Magic should be easy for you. Magician glanced at the ace of hearts in his hand. He understood what his boss meant. Poker cards could be used as a hidden weapon. He couldn't bring a fully formed weapon. He could only bring something unexpected and defensive. Fatty, you will be in charge of tracking. Once we meet up with Kwang's men, you can't follow anymore. Remember to lock onto our location and maintain a 24-hour link with the troops. Yes. Chinmo's words could be heard from the conference room. There were still 3 hours before the meeting time Kwang had said. They could only make sufficient preparations within a limited time. Kwang was already suspicious of them, and the moment they moved time, his suspicions would only increase. Therefore, this operation more or less depended on luck. In terms of disguise, there was no need to worry. Magician's makeup skills were on par with Bojio's. In less than half an hour, Chinmo's face had undergone a drastic change. He didn't look like he used to. Instead, he looked more like young Master Chin. However, he looked more imposing. He had a short beard on his face and looked very manly. Coupled with the knife scar at the corner of his eye, he didn't look like young Master Chin anymore. In addition, Chinmo's natural aura made Prince feel that his boss had entered the wrong profession. He seemed more like a big boss than a gangster. At the starting point, the hour hand pointed to 3. Chapter 1246. Prince paused for a moment. Chinmo glanced up, gesturing for him to pick up the call. Prince pressed the answer button. Kwang's laughter could be heard. He sounded extremely refined. I'm really sorry, I received news that someone leaked our meeting location. I'm investigating what exactly went wrong. Leaked? How was that possible? Prince instinctively wanted to deny it. Chinmo moved his fingers, indicating for him to cancel today's meeting. Cancel? Prince thought he had misread the gesture. But when he glanced at his boss's face, he knew what to say. But when she looked at her boss's face again, she knew what to say. Since there's a problem, let's not meet up for now. Find out who leaked the news and kill them. I have so many connections here. If someone finds out that my family met up with you, I'll be the one in trouble. My brother definitely won't forgive me. He's beside me right now. He was just scolding me, saying that I don't have a brain. You're being too serious. Don't worry, as long as you don't leak the information, everything will be safe. Kwang seemed to be implying something, but at this moment he smiled. But you can't go to the meeting location I sent you previously. I'll send you another address. Prince didn't agree immediately, instead he was worried. Are you sure it's fine? You can ask around, there won't be any problems if you're serious about working with me. Kwang smiled faintly. Prince's tone was one of complete trust. All right, send me the address, I'll head over with my brother. All right. Kwong hung up, the smile on his face not fading. Scorpion heaved a sigh of relief. He had been worried that King would trick the other party. After all, the other party was someone he wanted to work with. If there was a problem on the way, he wouldn't be in a good position. After all, Scorpion knew very well that no one had said that the news of their meeting had been leaked. King's intention in making this call was very obvious. He wanted to naturally change the meeting location and disrupt the other party's rhythm. Only then would he know if there was a problem with them. Until now, the other party's reaction has been the same as a buyer, including his worry. Kwong's gaze dimmed. Take the call first. I won't believe it unless we meet face to face. Yes. Scorpion accepted the order and began to make preparations. On the other side, Prince broke out in a cold sweat again. He finally realized that Kwong had been bluffing him. If he had said that it was impossible, it wouldn't have suited his identity as a buyer. Buyers would be more concerned about whether the transaction was really safe, whether the supply was good enough, and how the price and benefits would be. Kwong's words hinted at the question. Perhaps only boss would be able to respond at the first moment. Prince finally understood why his boss was the only one who could complete this mission. Other than their boss, anyone who came would lose to Kwong in terms of psychological testing. In the end, they would all be wiped out. The change in location once again showed how suspicious Kwong was of them. Chin-mo knew that the other party wanted to catch them off guard, so he was especially calm and adjusted his state of mind. He didn't mess up his initial plan. As usual, they drove 3 cars out. Fatty's car was especially low-key, and after the first 2 cars drove out, he didn't immediately follow. Since they were in the MT area, Chin-mo would definitely consider spies. Boss, there's a car following us in the 9 o'clock direction. Hunter turned the steering wheel, turning to look at the reflection in the rearview mirror. He frowned. Chin-mo seemed to be resting. Normal, continue driving. Fatty, is there anyone following you? No, according to boss, we set off 3 minutes later. It's really peaceful, Fatty replied as he adjusted the rearview mirror back to its original position. He looked at the order of the cars on the viaduct. Chin-mo and the others were the first to pass, followed by the people Kwong had sent to watch them. Finally, it was Fatty. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. It seemed magical, but it was also mentally taxing. The person sitting in the car. Only Doctor knew why his boss's every move was so precise. From the moment the phone rang, he had been constantly writing about Kwong's psychological profile. Everything looked very peaceful. But in reality, boss's battle had started earlier than them. Doctor wasn't worried that his boss would be wrong in this aspect. He was worried about his boss's psychological state. Swoosh. The car door opened. Someone walked over. It was Scorpion. It was enough to show Kwong's sincerity by sending Scorpion over. Scorpion had assumed that the person sitting in the boss seat would be the familiar Prince. He hadn't expected it to be someone else. He arched a brow. Who is this? Prince glanced at his boss fearfully. Compared to his usual self, he seemed more restrained. My brother. Scorpion was enlightened. At the same time, he understood something. The real boss had arrived. Hello, I'm Scorpion. I've heard of your name. Scorpion stretched his hand out. Chin-mo was natural, not bothering to conceal his powerful aura. I've heard about you from Consultant. Scorpion was even more certain that there wouldn't be any unpleasantness in this collaboration. Why didn't I see Consultant today? There are some accounts that I need him to check. I see. Scorpion didn't ask further. He lifted the black cloth in his hand. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble everyone to cooperate. Chin-mo didn't agree immediately, his impatience obvious. He even frowned. What's the meaning of this? Sometimes, the stronger your attitude, the softer the other party's attitude. Scorpion was like that. From his point of view, Chin-mo was rich and knew how to do business. In the future, the benefits from their collaboration would be huge. He couldn't offend him over such a small matter. The checks have been strict recently. According to the rules of the underworld, the first time you enter, there are too many things planted inside. If the location is known, everything will be gone. Please understand. Scorpion was ruthless when he was sinister, but when he wasn't, he was good with words. This type of person had to be careful. It wasn't without reason that Kwang had sent him. Chapter 1247. Scorpion heard the warning and immediately said, "Of course, once we earn money in the future, we will all be on the same side. Sorry for offending you this time." His words were polite, but Scorpion's wrist was firm. He lifted the black cloth and wrapped it 3 more times. Everyone was now in a state of darkness. They couldn't see anything. They couldn't even see the scanning rod when it passed by, but they could still feel it. Especially Chin Mo. He knew what was going on even when he was standing there. The person in charge of scanning shook his head at Scorpion, implying that there was no problem. Scorpion didn't speak. He raised his hand and pointed at his ear. The person in charge of scanning understood and pretended to sweep past Chin Mo's ear, but in reality, he was checking for a small Bluetooth earpiece. The alarm didn't sound, which meant everything was normal. Scorpion laughed. Come, I'll get in first." The 5 of them were arranged in a commercial car, and Wolf was holding the deposit in his hand. Even though he was blindfolded, Chin Mo's aura was so strong that it was hard to ignore him. Scorpion was very satisfied, and he gestured to the driver. What he didn't notice was Chin Mo, who was leaning sideways, tapped lightly on his watch. The signal was activated. Fatty immediately placed his fingers on the keyboard and typed furiously in order to lock onto the position of the red dot. Finally, Fatty heaved a sigh of relief, moving towards the red dot. At the start, he didn't think much of it, but after walking for a while, he realized they were going in circles. Fatty was still worried about how to inform his boss. Actually, there wasn't a need to inform him, because Chin Mo had already sensed Scorpion leading them in circles. Perhaps other Special Forces soldiers wouldn't be outstanding even if they were trained in this area. But for Chin Mo, observing his surroundings was his forte as a criminal psychologist. It wasn't just through images, but also through sounds and senses. The same hawker had floated over 3 times. Besides, it wasn't just the hawker, the number of turns was the same as well. Chin Mo tilted his head. Blindfolded, he looked extremely harmless. But in reality, both the military doctor and magician knew. Once they entered mission mode, their boss wouldn't stop his analysis. After all, time was tight to make a deal. Scorpion took another detour, but it was only a small one. Soon the car stopped. "Sorry to trouble you, sir. I need to change my mode of transportation." Scorpion was also very careful with his words, and would not reveal any information. However, it was not difficult to tell where they were. The smell of water was strong. In addition, when they lifted their legs, there was a shaking sound. It was obvious that they were on a boat. A rattling sound rang out. Chin Mo could tell that it was the sound of a small speedboat's engine with just one listen. It seemed that they were very close to their destination. Chin Mo moved his fingers. When the speedboat started moving, the water splashed onto his hair. Separated by the black cloth, he looked calm as though he was a guest. This completely dispelled Scorpion's suspicions. However, there was a problem on Fatty's side. Suddenly, there was a network error notification. 1 second ago, Fatty was still using the network to track the signal, and the red dot was still at the address he had locked onto. The next second, the red dot had disappeared. Chapter 1248. The signal was cut off. Fatty wasn't the only one whose expression changed because of the sudden danger. Even the people sitting in the meeting room clenched their fists. This time, the operation team was truly alone and without help. Even after giving the highest order and gathering everyone's strength, including the national defense, they still couldn't reconnect the signal. When Chin Mo realized that there was no signal, it was already 10 minutes later. After all, he was blindfolded and the others weren't talking, so he really couldn't notice the abnormality on his watch. It was just that the previous few times when the message was transmitted, the watch would vibrate slightly. This time it didn't. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. Listening to the sound of the speedboat gliding past his ears, His emotions didn't change at all. The military doctor also knew that they had boarded the boat. Every Special Force soldier had the ability to sense the flow of water, let alone this group of people. But only the military doctor knew that any sound of water, especially in such an environment, could easily leave a psychological impression on Chin Mo. Whenever it rained, his boss's mood would be extremely bad. It wasn't without reason. The shadow that day on his boss still existed. The military doctor was even worried that it was related to the psychological suggestion. Time passed slowly. There was no progress in the meeting room. Fatty tried his best to think of a way, but still couldn't lock onto the target. In the end, there was news that there was signal interference equipment inside. The radiation range was very wide, which was why it was easy for the plane to lose direction in this vicinity. In addition, when looking down, other than the complicated river below, there was only lush jungle. It was difficult to see the state of the situation inside, so there was no way to provide any support. The operation team had lost contact for half an hour. No one could predict what would happen in this half an hour. No news at this time might be the best news. The position of the sun moved down a little, and the surrounding scenery also changed. It had to be said that this place was really beautiful, but that kind of beauty seemed to hide danger. The river narrowed. Not far away, there were mercenaries with guns in their hands. Some sat on the boat, some stood on the shore, as if they were patrolling. Unexpectedly, some of them were young. Even the youngest was only 10 years old. Perhaps this was the real Golden Triangle. Because it was a lawless area. And because it wasn't peaceful, even children would carry guns. They were not poor. Even if stacks of money were to pass by them, they might not even blink. This place was rich in poppies. Everyone knew that there was no business in the world that could bring in money faster than poppies. What they lack is love. They didn't have parents, and even if they did, they were just slaves. He had been raised by Kwang's side since he was young, and was different from the other children. Their eyes were even colder than ordinary people's. This was the scene that Prince saw when his blindfold was removed. He stood there in a daze, unable to believe his eyes. Scorpion stood to the side and laughed. "Welcome to our paradise. From here on out, no one will be able to disturb our cooperation." Chapter 1249. Scorpion lifted his chin, gesturing for him to look into the depths of the forest. Chin Mo tilted his head. The first thing he saw were two metal tower-like buildings. Every Special Forces soldier had received training in this area. Some reacted slowly while others reacted quickly. Chin Mo took a glance and understood what it was. It was a signal interference tower. Not bad. He put one hand into his trouser pocket and said slowly, "In this way, our cooperation will be more secure." Scorpion laughed. "Boss Rong, you know your stuff." Prince's gaze was still on the children. Scorpion noticed it, turning his head over. "Why? Second young master hasn't seen them before?" Prince admitted carelessly. "They are so young, I haven't seen them before. Do they know how to shoot?" "Second young master Rong, don't underestimate them." The corners of Scorpion's lips curled up slowly. Sometimes, they are the most useful when dealing with Special Forces trying to sneak in. Prince tried his best to look natural. "Are you serious?" "Of course." Scorpion sized him up. Second young master's expression when he looks at them is similar to the expressions of Special Forces soldiers. But the difference is that second young master doesn't look like a Special Forces soldier. Prince didn't move. Chin Mo spoke up at this moment. "That's why I let him come out to see the world. He is well protected at home. My brother's biggest flaw is that he isn't ruthless enough." With that, Chin Mo glanced at Prince. That glance made Scorpion give up on some thoughts. After all, the second son of some families was indeed like that. Moreover, he was a rich fool. He smiled. "Boss Rong, this way please." Chin Mo didn't say anything else. He stuffed a hand into his pocket, walking past the two boys who were gambling with their guns. His aura was as strong as ever. Prince was startled. He understood that his reaction just now might have been seen through. He immediately returned to his role, reaching out to touch the bridge of his nose. Just like a useless nouveau riche, He followed behind Qin Mo. Every scene made one's heart skip a beat. There was even a sense of repulsion towards this place from the bottom of their hearts. Scorpion called this place heaven, but in Prince's eyes, it was no different from hell. Although it is sunny and beautiful, but the things these children did made people feel a chill run down their spines. Magician, who was standing at the side, felt the same way. It wasn't because of the children, but because after seeing the building, they understood why their boss had asked Scorpion that question. Firstly, it was to lower Scorpion's guard, and secondly, it was to tell them that there was no signal here. All of their communication would have to be done through other means. From now on, they would not have any external help. Keeping himself alive and not exposing his identity was more important than anything else. Who would have thought that Kuang would hide in such a place? There was even a checkpoint on the river. Most importantly, if they continued to head east, they would reach the border of China. This was what the entire operation team was most concerned about, including Qin Mo. Because they would absolutely not tolerate any person or organization growing stronger day by day in a place so close to Huaxia. Eyeing covetously like a tiger watching its prey, on the other side of the river, on a small road 50 kilometers away, a black Lamborghini roared past. It wasn't strange to see luxurious cars here, but most of them drove off-road vehicles, not this model. The AI system had already issued 3 consecutive warnings. When little Blackie predicted the next slope, he reminded the driver sincerely, "Master, slow down really. I'm so handsome. If I drag the bottom, it would look like a pair of leather shoes opening its mouth. It would be an awkward scene." Bojo arched a brow, not intending to be gentle. Little Blackie could only activate the self-rescue function when the bottom of the car came into contact with the huge pit. In the end, there was still a little smoke, but fortunately, it wasn't injured internally. As a broken car that relied on its looks to survive till now, it wasn't easy. Bojo ignored little Blackie's next words. Bojo opened the car door, walking into a mobile market. She wasn't sure if it was because of the environment. Many of them had broken arms and legs. Bojo could roughly guess why they were in such a state. Here, those who weren't willing to sell drugs would have their arms or legs broken. Now, the shadows of the flowers could no longer be seen. They had all turned into villages and crops. But the sales of drugs didn't decrease. It was probably because there was a need. There was a market. Those who took drugs out of curiosity or other reasons. They would never know that there were some people who lived at the edge of hell. They wouldn't compromise for something in their hearts. They knew better than anyone else how much destruction this thing could bring to a family. Hence, even if they had their arms and legs broken, they didn't want to participate. Who could understand their feelings? They weren't soldiers, they weren't even Chinese. They were ordinary citizens. All of them hoped that they had never harmed anyone. Sometimes, the heavens would give some people the best living environment. But those people didn't have a shred of conscience. Those who live at the bottom of society can emit light in their eyes. Because of this, that was why they wanted to destroy the hell that Kuang had created. Bojo raised her hand, lifting a black curtain. Sometimes, what people lacked the most was medicine. Behind the black curtain, there would usually be a Mongolian doctor. This time, he was the one who provided the medicine to Bojo. The moment Bojo entered, he moved back and forth. "Honestly, I really didn't want to prepare these for you. You should know that if you go against Kuang here, you will have to collect your corpse tomorrow. But after some thought, going against you hackers isn't going to end well either, after all." Bojo's expression turned serious. She looked at Bojo and said, "That's right, I didn't want to prepare these for you." With that, the Mongolian doctor suddenly paused, his eyes brightening as he looked at Bojo. Why are you here?" Bojo paused. "We don't know each other, right?" She definitely had an impression of such a unique breed. "Also, you put the cold medicine and diarrhea medicine together." Oh, the medicine is the same," he replied seriously. Chapter 1250. That's not right. This isn't the time for that. The Mongolian doctor was still wearing his mask when he placed the medicine down. "I've seen you play before, you're so handsome. Why aren't you competing? Why are you here?" Don't tell me you aren't going to compete. I've already bought the tickets for the Asian Cup. I'm telling you. If you aren't participating, I'll kill the tickets. Bojio. The Mongolian doctor paused before adding shyly, I'm your fan. Bojio was thinking about how to reply. The Mongolian doctor introduced himself once more. The moment your name appears on the livestream platform, I'll appear and I'll be the one who receives the most gifts. Bojio replied calmly, You've got the wrong person. I've got the wrong person? The Mongolian doctor removed his mask. Don't underestimate the power of fans. Wait a minute. Your skin has indeed turned darker, and your nose isn't as straight as before. Is this the effect of breaking away from your fantasy? No, that's not right. Isn't it a disguise? F***ck. Why am I so dumb? It's definitely a disguise. You probably won't need the paint I prepared for you. It'll save on costs. Bojio smiled. You call that saving? I'm saving it for your gifts, the Mongolian doctor replied confidently. Bojio thought, you might as well give me something more practical. In the end, she knocked on the table. Give me the things. The Mongolian doctor became more reliable when it came to serious matters. It's all here. I'll give you something else. Most importantly, God K. When you head out later, go for a stroll so Kwang won't be able to lock onto me. I'll use these 2 days to leave. I'll give you the medicine for free. There are too many poisonous snakes in the forest. It's better to be prepared. Bojio swept a glance at the medicine box, smiling. I won't need the sulfur. Do you have anesthetics? Give me a dozen needles. The Mongolian doctor was cooperative, but he did not expect his idol to take away all his belongings. After a moment, he turned towards her back view. Honestly, you should return to Supreme Alliance. It doesn't matter if you're a girl. Take me for example. After I found out you're a girl, my first reaction was to marry you. I just don't know if you have a boyfriend. I do. This was the first time Bojio had answered the Mongolian doctor's question. She seemed to have thought of someone, her lips curling into a smile. He's great. I'm planning to propose to him. The Mongolian doctor was stunned. Not only did he suddenly fall out of love, he was also fed a wave of dog food. You're a girl. Why are you proposing? Bojio couldn't hear the Mongolian doctor's cries in his heart. After all the preparations were done, the car sped off the accelerator. No matter what, she wanted to find the Almighty and send him back to Jiang City. Just like what the Mongolian doctor said. There was still an Asian competition waiting for them in Rivertown. Not for anyone, but for himself. Only in the esports arena. That was the true joy of that person. There are still 20 kilometers to the destination. A river has been detected ahead. Do you want to change your form? Xiaohei's voice came over. Bojio swung her tail. Change. Scorpion seemed to be surprised that the other party would say something like that. But on second thought, most vicious and merciless people wouldn't care if the things around them would harm others. After all, in their eyes, profit was the most important thing. Scorpion thought of this and smiled. Only then would he be worthy of being their partner. However, Scorpion did not know. From the moment they approached the Sea of Flowers, Prince, Magician and the rest subconsciously held their breaths to a certain extent. He quietly held his breath. Chapter 1252. Scorpion drove the off-road vehicle into a courtyard not far from the Sea of Flowers. He stopped the car. On the other side, a row of mercenaries stood in front of them. They had tattoos on their faces, and they held guns in their hands. Their expressions were fierce. This was probably a characteristic of this place. The perennial sunlight made their skin tanned, and they looked like outlaws. Only the person in the middle was different. That was Fangjia. But today, she didn't reveal her face. Instead, she wore a cloak and stood there, hiding her appearance. The other person was wearing a suit, and looked to be in his 50s. He held a walking stick in his hand, and looked over as though he had been waiting for Qin Mo. When Prince saw that person, he clenched his fists instinctively. Magician and the others were the same. Only Qin Mo's gaze was calm. He didn't look at that person. Instead, He glanced over and paused on a man in a white coat. "This is our king." Scorpion introduced. "King, this is Boss Rong." The man with the walking stick reached his hand out. "Hello." Chin Emo lifted the corner of his lips. No one knew what he was thinking. His gaze deepened. "I've heard a lot about you. Come please." The man reached out and led Chin Emo into the house. The moment he entered the room, Chin Emo could smell the fragrance of poppies. "Sir, you really know how to enjoy yourself," Chin Emo said when he sat down. The man laughed. "Boss Rong knows his stuff. I'm used to this fragrance and sleep well at night." The man took out a cigar and passed it to Chin Emo. "Want one?" The moment he said that, Prince wanted to clench his fists. Prince wanted to clench his fists instinctively. After all, everyone knew that in a place like this, things like cigarettes couldn't be accepted because no one knew what was inside. But before he could react, Chin Emo had already taken a puff. Chin Emo was already smoking a cigar. He tossed one to him and said, "Test it." Prince didn't have time to react as he took the cigar. The man narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Rong, what do you mean? Even though I do business in this area, I don't touch such things." Chin Emo crossed his legs, his aura strong. "Sir, what do you mean by giving me this? Doubt my identity? Then can I also suspect Sir's identity? Are you really Kuang?" The man paused, as if he hadn't expected him to be so direct. Moreover, this person didn't look like a soldier, nor was he sent by any department. However, the aura of a gangster was very strong. What was he going to say next? That person had no idea what to do. His gaze drifted in a certain direction. At this moment, even Prince could tell that there was something wrong with Kuang. Why did he keep looking at a family doctor? Just as the question popped up in his head, a voice entered his ears. "Boss Rong, you have a good eye." The family doctor walked out from inside. He was wearing a white coat and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked very gentle, and even had an indescribable elegance. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.